But there's always a lot to talk about at A&M, and there's a lot of I don't know. I think there's some interesting storylines surrounding Kevin Sumlin, stuff like that, and there's nobody who knows Texas A&M better than the esteemed beat writer for the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News. He is Brent Zwerneman, with as if his last name weren't hard enough to spell, they then named him Brent instead of Brett, so you have to get the N right. It's Brent Zwerneman joining us here on DCTF Live. As somebody with also a very, I get a lot of mail for Greg Tepper, Brent. I feel your pain.
Yeah, I'm not even the most known Zwerneman in town. By the way, in Bryan College Station, there's a Zwerneman Flooring, and so everywhere I go, hey, I'm Brent Zwerneman. Oh, you're with the flooring company.
You're the flooring guy.
So anyway, yeah. So there's a pitch from my very distant cousin. Somehow my dad and their grandfather put it all together that we're probably about sixth or seventh cousins. So okay. Frequent Zwerneman Flooring when you come to town.
Do you get like?
Let's make sure I stop there.
Yeah. Do you get free hardwoods?
You know what? When we remodeled our house, I chose Zwerneman Flooring. My wife was like, "You don't even know anything about this place. You're just choosing them because of a name." And yeah, sure enough, that was pretty much what it came down to. They did a good job, though.
I'll be honest, I would too. Like if they were like a Tepper chandeliers, and we needed a chandelier.
I'll Google that right now.
Please.
I almost said Tepper. Yeah, Tepper chandeliers.
Tepper chandeliers.
Yeah.
So you also have a job, and it's covering Texas A&M, and obviously a big headline from late last week was the Kyle Allen transfer. I'm sorry, Max, you're making a face at me.
There is a company called Tepper Electric that makes chandeliers.
Well, looks like my wife knows what we're getting for Christmas. So big news over the weekend or late last week, where Kyle Allen announces that he's transferring. Two questions. One, did this surprise you when it came out? And two, what does that say really about the state of Texas A&M football right now?
Yeah, should I admit as a beat writer that I was, I should say, well, I saw this coming. It was just a matter of time. Hey, it totally caught me off guard, but I take solace in that it caught everyone else off guard. I think the only ones that didn't catch off guard were maybe Mr. and Mrs. Allen, because, yeah, it was out of the blue. And here's why I thought it was out of the blue. The guy won the starting job back. Mm-hmm. He was the starting quarterback. It was clear that he was way ahead of Kyler Murray in terms of being a developed college quarterback. He was a starter going into the bowl a couple of weeks out from the Music City Bowl in Nashville. And suddenly there's this announcement, and immediately A&M also puts out a release saying the transfer has been granted immediately. I mean, you talk about severing the ties. There was nothing like, yeah, he'll do this in January or anything like that. So yeah, I will totally admit to that based on the idea that the guy had won the starting job back. And going back to the state of what's going on, I think A&M is now seeing what it's like to recruit five-star quarterbacks, to have them in back-to-back years and then have to kind of deal with what that comes, with that talent comes with the idea that these guys have been told they're five-star quarterbacks for years and years. So, why exactly Kyle chose to do this is still a little bit of a mystery, but I think that's part of it. He lost the job midway through the season. Later on, he told us he had an AC sprain. See, I never really held that much against Kevin Sumlin, because if the guy's out there practicing and fighting through it and it literally is not missing any practice time or whatever, then yeah, you say, yeah, he's fighting through something, but you don't say he's injured, but that was kind of a point of contention during the year. And so Kyle Allen, when he visited with us again, once he won the starting job, he said, well, I had an AC sprain in my throwing shoulder, and, I had fought through it. So anyway, that was all kind of a weird deal, but I wouldn't think all of that would add up to a sudden transfer, especially if you're talking about a guy who next year would have been eligible for the NFL draft and, is apparently still a pretty high prospect. So now he's going to have to sit out a year and put that off a year. So a lot of strange things about the announcement of that transfer.
And so now all eyes turn towards Kyler Murray, who is, unless you have some sort of other opinion, looks like the guy for Texas A&M. Obviously a superstar quarterback, had a very, I would say, uneven debut in college. Is it a case where A&M just still has a lot of faith that they're going to develop Kyler Murray into a top-tier quarterback?
Yeah, I think their impression is, because I think the coaching staff was mostly caught off guard too. So now it's a deal where they say, hey, they don't have any choice but to develop them. But one of the things that's been probably, and I'm kind of indicting myself here by saying this has been underreported, but going back to the LSU game, late in that game when Kyle Allen came out, who came in? It wasn't Kyler Murray, it was Jake Hubenak. So Hubenak was second string at year's end, at the end of the regular season. So, I think that fight is ongoing between Jake Hubenak and Kyler Murray. Here's one thing I will say about Jake Hubenak. He's a guy who's kind of the anti-5-star. He walked on at Oklahoma State. He transferred to Blinn. He broke Cam Newton's records in a year. His passing records at Blinn. Has been a lifelong Aggie, loves the place. I mean, he's a guy who's fought for everything he's got. And I think there's some appreciation from the coaching staff on that front. And frankly, he looked pretty good when he did get his playing time. So that's also another thing that they feel a little bit better about, that Jake Hubenak can do the job, or at least, give it a pretty good shot. So Kyler Murray, I wouldn't say it's clear-cut his job. One of the things that people kind of held against Kyler, saying, oh, he's not an SEC quarterback. They have to remember, he had only been on campus 3 months when he first started getting playing time, whereas a guy like Johnny Manziel, they said, well, Johnny Manziel was a freshman too. Yeah, he was a freshman, but he was a redshirt freshman plus an early enrollee. Johnny Manziel had been on campus a year and a half before he ever took a snap against Florida in that first game. So there's a big difference there. And here's something else to keep an eye on, guys, is Kyler still plans to play baseball, from what I understand, for the Aggies, and I think anybody who knows his long-term future is, his long-term seven-figure future is probably in baseball. I mean, he's still a heck of a prospect in that sport, and so he's going to stick with it, and I can't blame him on that front, because others are saying, hey, now if he's the guy, he needs to concentrate on football. Well, not if he's going to be playing pro baseball down the line. So. Yeah. We'll see how all that plays out. It might be a deal where Jake Hubenak is the lone scholarship guy taking part in all the spring drills as well.
He's Brent Zwerneman. He's the A&M beat writer for the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News, joining us on DCTF Live. Get involved with the conversation, hashtag DCTF Live. Do you get the feeling that you obviously have your finger on the pulse of the Aggie fan base as well? Do you get the feeling that there's pressure on Kevin Sumlin?
Absolutely, and I think I've done this for about 20 years, with a few years away to cover the Spurs and Dallas Cowboys, and then I came back because I just love covering college football. I can't ever remember an off season. Now I remember an irate fan base after 77-0 for Dennis Franchione, or 59-0 for Kevin Sumlin, or 23-3 this year at Ole Miss for Kevin Sumlin. I can't remember this much anger, I guess you would say, during the, and I'm throwing up air quotes right here, off season. I know there's still a bowl game to go, about something that's happened in the off season, and that's Kyle Allen's transfer, because it caught so many people off guard. And I think Aggies had gotten to the point where they thought, okay, this is our guy moving forward. He's going to be the one that's going to have this team competing for an SEC West title when he's a junior. When Myles Garrett is a junior, you have more upperclassmen. Well, so this has thrown everyone for a loop. In other words, it's really intensified the pressure on Kevin Sumlin to get it done now, because this was a very favorable schedule they had, and they had a bye week before Alabama came to town and still got blown out and so forth by double digits, and so it didn't work out. Well, the 2016 schedule is much tougher. You're going to Auburn, you're going to Alabama, you open with UCLA here, you got Tennessee on the schedule, so it's different. So I think that's what's kind of upset fans at this point, is that Kyle Allen was the best hope for that elusive conference title, and that took a big step back with that, and Kevin Sumlin's taking the blame for that.
On the other side, it seems like now there wasn't a whole lot else to go, but a whole lot else place to go but up from last year. But it seems like the defense really did make strides in the first year under John Chavis. Do you get the feeling from A&M fans and even just the A&M higher ups, shall we say, that they're pretty pleased with what John Chavis has done, even with maybe limited resources? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he did that without having a lot of struggles at linebacker and having a lot of injuries there and a lack of talent. So, yeah, you're talking about a unit that went from 102nd in total defense last year to 42nd this year. Now, if someone had told me that before the season, I would have said, okay, this team is, 11-1 in the regular season. I mean, competing for the West title, maybe playing in the championship game for the league and so forth. I would, the feeling you get from Aggie fans right now is exasperation because the offense has been so good in past years. It wasn't so great last year, but of course during the Manziel era, it was off the charts, and it was decent last year. So now you're talking about a defense that's higher rated than the offense, and what Aggie fans are waiting for is them to put those two together, which, and then you might really be onto something. But, yeah, to answer your question, absolutely pleased with what John Chavis has done, and the results are right there in the numbers. And so then you go back and say, okay, is Kevin Sumlin now searching for his John Chavis on offense? And I believe, it's what I've written for a month now, that Jake Spavital will not be offensive coordinator next season. There's things playing out where maybe he takes another job, he goes back to quarterbacks coach or something, but Kevin Sumlin will have another offensive coordinator moving forward.
We're talking with Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News here on DCTF Live. And Brent, your next stop for the Aggies is the Music City Bowl against Louisville. When you look at this matchup, maybe from a 50,000-foot view, obviously Kyler Murray maybe will get the start. Maybe it's Jake Hubenak, who knows. But what do you see as far as a matchup is concerned for A&M against Louisville?
Yeah, people have said that the Aggies ducked Texas Tech in the Texas Bowl, and I don't buy that. For one thing, LSU was lobbying hard for the Texas Bowl. LSU played in the Music City Bowl last year. LSU beat A&M and so forth. So all that didn't add up. What I'm getting to here is I think Louisville might be a tougher matchup than Texas Tech for the Aggies. I mean, Louisville had some close losses, a tight one to Clemson early on, a tight one to U of H early on, really came on strong later in the season. So I think it's pretty much, especially with the Kyle Allen news, it's pretty much a toss-up. And you talk about Bobby Petrino, he had the Aggies number big time when that Arkansas A&M series was going on as a non-conference affair up there in Cowboy Stadium. Petrino won all those games. Of course, Kevin Sumlin wasn't on board yet. That was against Mike Sherman. So I thought it was a pretty intriguing. I guess maybe a casual fan would say, "Oh, Louisville, what?" When they could have played Texas Tech, the old Big 12 and Southwest Conference rival. But I actually think this is a pretty intriguing matchup for the Aggies, and they're going to have their hands full, just like they did a year ago with West Virginia having to come back to beat those guys in the Liberty Bowl.
And finally, the Music City Bowl means that you get a trip to beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. Brent Zwerneman, how excited are you about going to Nashville, Tennessee?
Well, I thought this might be my big break to bust out my John Connolly impersonator deal. Are y'all familiar with John Connolly?
I was born in 1986.
Making money at 30 with a wife and a son.
Wow.
So I'm thinking I'm going to try to make my break while I'm there. What do y'all think? You think I got a chance?
Listen.
Hey, I actually once did a John Connolly impression for John Connolly after his concert here at the Hall of Fame in Bryan, and he goes, very nice, and you could see his eyes were kind of darting around looking for security. So I figured at that time probably. Yeah.
So what you're saying is
I'm holding on to the dream though.
So what you're saying is that this really may be the last your last good chance of breaking in and getting that big record deal.
I'm 44, so I'm thinking there's still some probably many decades ahead that I will have that chance. Sure. But you're probably right. That's probably the last chance. But I do look at a guy like Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. Hey, they got started late in their careers. I'm kind of holding on to that. Hey, don't dash my dreams here, Tep.
Listen, I'm not, and I'll tell you that Willie Nelson has got to be celebrating. I wonder if he knows that his Abbott Panthers won the 6-man state championship. Somebody should tell him. If you run into him in Nashville, please let him know. He's Brent Zwerneman. He is the esteemed sports writer, A&M beat writer for the San Antonio Express News and the Houston Chronicle. Brent, thanks for hopping on with us, and we probably won't talk to you before then, so happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that fun stuff.
Hey, Merry Christmas to y'all, and I guarantee y'all didn't think y'all were going to get a John Connolly
that is
scene there.
100% correct. Thanks, Brent.
We didn't even get to my favorite movie. Merry Christmas, everybody, Mr. Potter. All right, we'll see y'all.
Okay. There goes amateur impressionist Brent Zwerneman joining us on DCTF Live.